Hello, today I'm going to be talking about my top 7 favourite books at the moment. I tried to make it a top 5, but I couldn't bring myself to remove any of the wonderful books from this list. I say at the moment because, as most avid readers will tell you, this list isn't static. I might read something tomorrow which absolutely blows me away and goes right into number 1, or I might reread something and find I enjoy it much more than I did the first time round. But here are my top 7 books as of today. Number 7, The Big Over Easy by Jasper Fforde. Released in 2005, The Big Over Easy was one of the first grown-up books I can remember reading. My dad had read about it in the paper and bought it while we were shopping one day. When we got home, I picked it up to see what it was about, and I read the whole thing in a few days. As some of you fans of noir might realise straight away, the title is a play on the novel The Big Easy by James Conway. The Big Over Easy is a police procedural with a twist. DI Jack Sprat is investigating the murder of Humpty Dumpty. Did he fall or was he pushed? It sounds like the start of a children's book, and while it is perfectly fine for children to read, it's a proper whodunit with all the mystery and suspense you'd expect from a modern crime novel. It just happens to be set in a world where nursery rhyme characters are real. Number 6, The Rivers of London by Ben Aronovich. In all honesty, I don't remember where I first picked this book up. I think it must have been my local library while I was waiting for a friend. But wherever it was, this series has become a staple of my bookshelf, and I own every book, as well as the 2 novellas which star Peter Grant. Another crime novel with a twist, The Rivers of London is about an everyday Metropolitan Police officer working in London who suddenly finds himself interviewing a ghost in the middle of Covent Garden. Described by one reviewer as, if Harry Potter grew up and joined the police force, The Rivers of London is a brilliantly logical, thought-out world of magic, vampires, living rivers, and ancient powers. In fact, it's so logical and well thought out, it makes you realise how many plot holes and inconsistencies there are with something like the Harry Potter series. These books have been criticised for sometimes sounding like a London travel guide, given how detailed Aronovich's descriptions can be, but overall they're great reads which should be given a chance by lovers of both magical fantasy and crime readers. Number 5, Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. It might come as a surprise to some people, but I am a bit of a gamer. Not as much as some people, but I probably could do a top 10 favourite games list if I ever felt like it. Ready Player One was a sensation when it was first released, and I'm sure most of you have seen or at least heard of the film adaptation directed by Spielberg. The film is good, but as with 99% of film adaptations, not as good as the book. Set in a world which has fallen apart, where the only escape is a virtual reality known as the Oasis, Waze Watts is a gunter, or Easter egg hunter. Whoever solves the clues left by the Oasis's founder and finds the Easter egg will inherit control of the Oasis. Filled with 80s references, pop culture, and less well-known culture, Ready Player One doesn't rely on you knowing anything about video games or even the 80s. It's a fun, young adult adventure about a teenager trying to defeat the suit-wearing head of an evil corporation. It's well worth a read, even if you have no interest in video games or virtual worlds. Number 4, The Cat Among the Pigeons by Agatha Christie. The first novel by the Queen of Crime I ever read, The Cat Among the Pigeons will always have a special place in my heart, as it set me down a road of reading nothing but Agatha Christie books for about 2 years. One of her lesser known ones, never reaching the famous heights of Murder on the Orient Express or Death on the Nile, Cat Among the Pigeons is a perfect example of Christie's writing style and ability to tell a story. Set in an all-girls boarding school, it's about a foreign revolution, a kidnapped princess, missing jewels, and the teachers suddenly start being murdered. It's technically a Poirot book, but he doesn't turn up until quite late in, and most of the detective work is done by other characters. So don't go into it thinking it's going to be starring Poirot for the whole thing. A genuinely great mystery by Christie, and an excellent introduction if you've never read any of her work before. Number 3, The Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. I picked this up after hearing a lot about the Netflix adaptation Shadow and Bone. I've read the Shadow and Bone series as well, but The Six of Crows is my personal favourite. A young adult book set in a fantasy world, The Six of Crows is about a group of misfit teenagers trying to break into one of the most secure fortresses in the world. described as Game of Thrones meets Ocean's 11, I don't want to say too much about this amazing book, as I think it's best experienced for yourself. I will say though, despite being a young adult book, Bardot does not shy away from serious, hard-hitting topics, with the characters having been sold into slavery, a race war going on between those who are magical and those who aren't, as well as 14-year-olds being forced to work as prostitutes. It's an amazing book, but it's as dark as a young adult book can be. Number 2. Going Postal by Terry Pratchett. The first Terry Pratchett book I ever read, Going Postal, is still my favourite. Focusing on a con man who gets put in charge of the failing post office, Going Postal is wickedly funny, amazingly clever book, with so many ideas which just make me go, I wish I had come up with that idea. Terry Pratchett was obviously hugely successful, and people still love his work all over the world. If you haven't read any of these books, I'd highly recommend you start with this one, as it's a brilliant introduction to his famous Discworld and wonderful city of Ankh-Morpork. As a side note, if you are a fan of Discworld, I'd also highly recommend Discworld Noir, an adventure game for the PC released back in 1999. It's got all the humour and wit of the books, and is one of my favourite video games of all time. Number 1. Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. Treasure Island is always going to hold a special place in my heart, because it was one of the few audiobooks we had when I was a kid. So every long road trip was spent listening to the adventures of Jim Hawkins and the legendary Long John Silver. Perhaps it's nostalgia for those simpler times which makes me call it my favourite book, but there's a reason it's still considered a classic and so widely available 140 years after publication. Don't dismiss it because it's old, and don't dismiss it because it's written as a children's book. It's not that long and it's easy to read, so definitely worth picking up, even if classics aren't your usual thing. So that's my top 7 favourite books at the moment. Like I said, this list might change as time goes on, but I'm sure some of these will always be on my favourites list, no matter what happens. Let me know your favourite book in the comments, and check out some of my other videos, including my Short Guide 2 series, where I talk about different aspects of writing your own stories. As always, happy writing!